Welcome back to another Our BMX Explained video. I am Ryan Fudger, and you guessed it, we are talking about sprockets today. Before we jump into all the gearing and materials and all that stuff with sprockets, I just want to point out that sprocket is actually one of the only flat surfaces that you'll find on a BMX bike. So that's where you'll find a lot of brands take some poetic license, really show off their machining abilities, and kind of make the sprocket the showpiece of the entire bike. So I consider it to be pretty important when you're putting together your bike. If it's just a color scheme or if it's just the overall buttoning up of your bike, I think the sprocket is definitely one of the key pieces that brings it all together. So if you're new to the game, I definitely should explain gearing to you. I'll try and make it as brief as possible. How hard your bike is to pedal is the relation from your front sprocket to your cassette or free coaster cog on the back. So the industry standard is 25 teeth on the front and 9 on the back, and that's for a very middle, what you would come to expect a bike to feel like gearing ratio. If you switch just your front sprocket and you go to something like this Laguardia, which is a 28 tooth sprocket, your bike will be a lot harder to pedal, which means you will accelerate much more slowly, but your top speed will be higher. So guys like Trey Jones, Gary Young, they all run a harder gearing just because they prefer, hitting that top speed for something that they're trying. You can even see it in the way that Trey Jones pedals. He puts everything he has into those first couple of cranks because he needs to, because he runs a harder gearing. So what you'll find these days is that most brands only really make a 25 tooth or a 28 tooth sprocket. United Sprocket that I'm about to talk about, they have a 30 tooth or a 33 tooth available. And then Profile goes over the top. They have pretty much every in between from 24 to 26, 27, all the way up, I think even to kind of some old school sizing in certain sprockets, not all of them, but that's just the way Profile rolls. With them being on the race side as well, racers are much more particular about their tooth size. They even go like half teeth and stuff. It's crazy. So to wrap it up, if you're unsure on what size sprocket to get, go ahead and count the teeth on your back wheel on the cassette or the free coaster or the free wheel if you have one, and then go ahead and do the ratio. So if you have 9 teeth, it should be 25, and then you work your way up from there. Maybe in the description I'll put the ratio, but pretty straightforward, pretty simple these days. Good to go. 99% of the sprockets you'll find today are made out of aluminum. Generally that is 70-75 aluminum, which is a harder aluminum, or you get a little bit of a softer version in 60-61. 70-75 is generally what you're looking for when you're looking for a sprocket, but if you have a 60-61 sprocket, you're totally fine as well. So occasionally you'll bump into something like a chromoly sprocket. I'll splice in a photo of it. It looks totally different. Or you'll find, a mild steel on some complete bikes, or there's even a company that makes a titanium sprocket. But again, 99% of the sprockets that you'll run into today are made of 70-75 aluminum. From there, sprockets differ quite a bit. So we have this Profile sprocket here, definitely a very minimal design, and it has a spline drive insert, which we will get into. We have this Odyssey Laguardia sprocket, and it is machined all out of aluminum. So it is all one piece, meant to last a very long time. And then we have this Cinema sprocket and guard combo. So it's an aluminum sprocket with a plastic guard that is meant to be replaceable bolted to it. So there's a lot of variety out there, especially between design and spline drive and sizing and guard or no guard or replaceable or one piece and all this stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The last thing before I go ahead and run through those sprockets right there is spindle size. This S&M sprocket is pretty typical. This is what's known as kind of a universal fit sprocket. It has, a smooth bore right here, and it comes with 2 spacers, a 22 mil spacer and then a 19 mil spacer. It should pretty much go on every single crank out there. Don't 100% quote me if there's some weird set of cranks that just simply don't work, but that's the idea, is that it's compatible with everything. So that is not the case with this Profile sprocket. It has what is called a spline drive system. I'll go ahead and throw a close-up of it, but it has a hardened steel insert that matches up with a 48 splined spindle. So this sprocket essentially slides onto your spindle and it doesn't need to be bolted. Profile's goal here obviously was to simplify the install, remove bolts, you know, those things do come loose very often. I think if you aren't planning on switching cranks and you know you're gonna run a 48 spindle crank set for a long time, this sprocket is perfect. But if you end up switching cranks around and then all of a sudden you got a pair of Odyssey cranks, you also need to buy a new sprocket. So advantages, disadvantages, up for you to decide as always. How do you know if you want something like this, or you want something like this, or more like this, or kind of a solid, sorry about that, solid sprocket like this Fiend sprocket? Where do you land with this? And I think it's pretty safe to say that as long as you're not hitting your sprocket very much, something like this is the lightest and it will last, of course. This Fiend sprocket, you'll hear the price in a couple minutes, but I assume this Fiend sprocket is a lot cheaper just because of the nature of it than this. And then you'll have, you know, the machining that goes into something like this. And then obviously there's two different compounds. These are probably both pretty expensive as well. And if you prefer grinding on plastic and you actually like do a lot of sprocket grinds and you're actually sliding on this, you may want to go with a plastic guard that is replaceable. Or if you're more of a sprocket stall or you just want to protect your sprocket for years to come or protect your chain and stuff like that, something like this one-piece aluminum is the way to go. As always, there's 1,000 different ways to ride BMX and there's 1,000 different parts, and that's up for you to decide. So what I have is about 15 sprockets behind me and I'm gonna run through the specs. As always, these came in a box from sourcebmx.com. So if you're looking for a sprocket or any other BMX part, hit up sourcebmx.com. They ship all over the world. You know the spiel by now. UK warehouse, US warehouse, blah, blah, blah. They'll get you your part in a few days, and I'm sure they have pretty much the best prices as well. Sales pitch. First up is the Sunday NOS V2. This is the second version of Sunday's original guard sprocket. It is made of 7075 T6 aluminum. And to quote Sunday, the NOS V2 features refined machining geometry for a sleeker look, and it's designed to work with and protect all chains from unwanted impact. Worth discussing is the fact that the NOS V2 has 5 sprocket bolt positions. For some reason, you just do a shit ton of sprocket stalls on brick ledges or cement ledges, and your guard itself gets worn down. You just remove your sprocket bolt, rotate, and then you have a whole fresh set of, you know, sprocket stalls ahead of you essentially. So like the Merit I'm gonna discuss has 5, the Odyssey one has 3, Kink has 3. Either way, your sprocket is going to last a super long time, but if you are really brutal on your sprockets, having 5 could be good. And then obviously going forward, when you have a removable guard, you're supposed to rotate the guard itself more so than, you know, this BSD one only has 1 sprocket bolt. So you're supposed to take the bolts off, rotate the guard itself, and that's the way you keep this thing alive. So just to throw that out there, just so we know that going forward. The price for the NOS V2 is $63.12. Comes in black and this frost blue right here, and it is available in both 25 and 28 tooth sizes. And the weight on this particular sprocket, the 28 tooth, is 5.6 ounces, aka 160 grams. And for the one guy who commented on the last video about the weights, I actually do weigh all of these sprockets myself, so they are accurate. So screw you, guy. We'll go ahead and keep it going with the one-piece guarded sprockets. This is Odyssey's Laguardia sprocket. You'll see a lot of similarities between this and the NOS V2, but it is a little more raw, obviously a bit of a different design, but there you can also see a bit more machining and just a kind of a less smooth look. So this one's kind of a little more rugged. Pretty much the same story here, another one-piece 7075 T6 aluminum sprocket. This one from Odyssey features 3 sprocket bolt holes, but the story is essentially the same. meant to keep your chain nice and safe in here for a very long time. This one costs $54.99 and comes in silver, pink, black, and this here yellow, which is kind of gold. And again, it is available in 25 and 28 tooth sizes. And this one weighs 5.7 ounces, aka 161 grams. Next up is the Kink Eastman guard sprocket. Again, this one is obviously meant to keep your chain nice and safe for a super long time, nice and beefy all right here, but it does have 2 machine recesses for your cranks. According to Kink, machine crank arm reliefs create proper clearance for all popular crank sets, and the guard offset accommodates all chain widths and give the Eastman sprocket maximum compatibility. Price for the Eastman is $49.99. It comes in matte silver, matte gunpowder gray, and this black. It is available in 25 and 28 tooth designs, and this one right here, the 28 tooth, weighs 6 ounces, aka 169 grams, and you can of course find it at sourcebmx.com. Next up, we have Merit's Pentagard sprocket. This is Brandon Began's signature sprocket. According to Merit, it has a super strong 5-spoke design and is machined out of 7075 T6 aluminum. It also has 5 sprocket bolt locations, so you can go ahead and rotate it as many times as you want, and it should last a very, very long time. The Pentagard sprocket costs $65, comes in gray, teal, black, polished, and purple, and it only comes in a 25 tooth design, which weighs 5.1 ounces, aka 144 grams. The last of the one-piece guard sprockets is Sabrosa's Barcelona sprocket. This is Simone Baracco's signature sprocket, and according to Sabrosa, Simone wanted a sprocket that was strong enough to handle his creative and constant abuse when riding through his beloved city of Barcelona. Sabrosa touts the fact that this is 8 millimeters thick right here, and comparing this sprocket to the Sunday and the Kink and the Odyssey, it is a little bit thicker for sure. So if you are looking for a guard that could possibly take more abuse than your typical one, the Barcelona sprocket may be for you. Obviously, it's not all that machined down, so it's gonna weigh a little bit more, but as always, there's a choice for you to make. Just like the Kink sprocket, it does have relief cuts for cranks on both sides and 2 sprocket bolt holes, and it is compatible with most every chain. The Barcelona sprocket does have a bit of a hefty price tag. It comes in at $99.40. It comes in black, concrete gray, and it is available in 25 and 28 tooth sizes. This one right here is a 25 tooth, and it weighs 5.9 ounces, aka 166 grams. So obviously if you run a 28, expect it to be a bit heavier than that. So now we're jumping into the hybrid sprocket guard combo. First up is this Cinema Beta guard sprocket. The sprocket itself is machined out of 6061 T6 aluminum, and it has a high impact replaceable bolt-on guard. As you can see, the sprocket itself is pretty minimally machined, but it does actually lock in. Gonna be pretty hard to see, but it does actually lock into the guard itself through the design. The front is actually machined down and it locks in super smoothly. So as you may or may not know, threading directly into aluminum can get a little bit dicey after a little while, but the way that Cinema designed the sprocket, the way it locks in, and there's 4 mounting locations, it should be pretty sturdy for you. I think Cinema's goal overall was to deliver a quality sprocket at pretty much the lowest price that they could do, and this one clocks in at $46.99, which is pretty affordable. The Beta guard sprocket is available in black and silver, meaning that this is the silver one, so this will be black if you decide to go with that colorway, and it only comes in 25 tooth version. This one weighs in 6.2 ounces, aka 176 grams. And if that weight is a little bit surprising to you, it's just the amount of plastic that they have to use along with the hardware that generally drives the weight up on these 2-piece hybrid sprockets. I feel like everybody knows it already, but obviously if you decide you don't want to do grinds anymore and that's not the style of riding you want to do whatsoever, you can pull this guard off and you got a perfectly normal sprocket ready to go for you. Next up is the Primo Omni Guard sprocket. This one obviously looks pretty wild, all the cutaways and stuff like that. Definitely give it a futuristic look. Pretty straightforward overall. You can obviously see from the back of the sprocket, it is just a hole for your spindle and a hole for your sprocket, and that's about it, which is kind of a little bit odd because there's actually 2 recesses on the guard, and so you'd think they'd put 2 sprocket holes in there as well so you can move it, but obviously I understand that you may want to rotate your guard at some point as well. So I get what they're going for, but it seems like cutting an extra hole right here may have extended the life of it. But overall, again, I think this sprocket looks super cool. I appreciate the overall design and aesthetic of it, and I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. One thing I think I should point out is that Primo actually chose to go ahead and go with a different style of hardware. They didn't necessarily trust the idea of threading the aluminum, so they went through with I believe these are called, like, I almost want to say rib nuts or something, but essentially they're, well shit, let's actually just check. Yeah, so they are like a rib nut style thing with a bolt. It is not threaded directly into the sprocket itself, so it should last pretty much forever, because that's steel hardware versus the aluminum. I feel like I would personally like the steel hardware. I just feel like, in my experience, threads and aluminum just don't work very well, but that's totally up for you to decide. The OmniGuard is a little bit more expensive than that Cinema sprocket, but not by much. It costs $49.69, comes in black and polished, so the sprocket itself would be polished, and a 25 and 28 tooth version. This one is a 25 tooth, and it weighs 7.1 ounces, aka 200 grams, so that's possibly the heaviest sprocket. But again, they went for quality hardware, and that plastic, even with the reliefs, I mean, there's a huge chunk of plastic there, so that's to be expected. Last of the hybrid guard sprockets is the BSD Barrier sprocket. The Barrier sprocket has a CNC'd 7075 alloy sprocket and a tough nylon removable guard. Unlike the Cinema and Primo designs we just saw, there are some cutouts and a little extra machining here on the Barrier sprocket, which should bring the weight down quite a bit. And like Primo, they opted to not thread the sprocket itself and go for some steel hardware. Although compared to the Primo hardware, the BSD stuff looks a little clunky, lower grade, but I mean, that's definitely nitpicking at this point. Pretty much out of new features for hybrid sprockets, but the BSD Barrier is available for $54.99. It is only available in black, but it does come in 25 and 28 tooth sizes. It weighs 6.5 ounces, aka 183 grams. Okay, now we are on to regular ass sprockets. First up is the Profile Galaxy Spline Drive sprocket, and I chose to do this one first because it's kind of the most extra one. It has the most machining and has this spline drive system right here, and it kind of just has all the bells and whistles that you can pretty much find on sprockets these days. So jumping into the specs, it is machined out of 7075 aluminum in the USA. I think this one and the S&M are pretty much the only sprockets actually made in the United States. So if that's important to you, those would be your options. Aside from the aesthetics, all the rounded edges and extra machine work, the main difference between the Galaxy sprocket and the rest of the sprockets you'll see is obviously this steel insert, which only makes it compatible with 22mm spindles. The Profile Galaxy sprocket costs $78.33, so it obviously is pretty steep, but in my opinion, it's kind of hard to find a prettier sprocket than something like this. It is available in red, gold, black, blue, right here, silver, matte black, and it is available in 25, 28, and 32 sizes. This one right here is 25 tooth, I forgot for a second, and it weighs 2.9 ounces, aka 81 grams. So I'm not sure how that compares to the rest of the sprockets you will see, but that is very, very light. Next up, we have the S&M Drainman sprocket. As I said, this is made in the USA out of 6061 aluminum. It's pretty straightforward. I think the most notable thing is this dope S&M camo wrap, which does add a few dollars to the price. This one costs $89.46. Again, it comes in this color camo, polished, black, and an S&M shield wrap. If you like the sprocket but don't necessarily care about the color, the polished and black, I guarantee, are a bit cheaper. So go ahead and check the source site for that. It comes in 25, 28, 30, 33, and 36 tooth options. If you're looking for something a little abnormal and out of the typical range, the Drainman sprocket is probably what you're looking for. This 25 tooth version weighs 2.9 ounces, aka 81 grams. So it is actually nearly identical, aka 100% identical to the profile sprocket. And I believe that comes with the steel insert on the profile sprocket. So when you actually, just for the weight weenies out there, you add that bolt right there and you'll get a couple extra ounces where the profile doesn't need that. So keep that in mind if you really actually care about stuff like that. Here we have the Mission Nexus sprocket. I'll just go ahead and quote Mission on this one. The stylish and affordable Nexus sprocket has a web spoke design that is stamped and CNC'd from 6061 aluminum, making it an aesthetic yet highly functional lightweight sprocket. So when Mission says it's stamped and CNC'd, what they have is a circle of aluminum essentially, and then they stamp out the general shape. You can actually see the marks within the design itself of the blade that cut everything out, and then they clean it all up with a CNC machine. So it makes a little bit of a difference in the overall appearance of the sprocket, and that you'll see that in the details in right here. But what you have is a visually appealing sprocket for literally $19.99. So if you're on a budget and you don't necessarily care about, you know, some minor aesthetic details, then that's totally your call whatsoever. As far as strength, it's made of 6061 aluminum, which is totally fine. The Mission Nexus sprocket comes in black, gold, purple, red, and this silver right here. It is available in 25 tooth only, and it weighs a measly 1.9 ounces, aka 53 grams. Next up is Colin Varignac's signature sprocket from Fiend, aka the Varignac's V2 sprocket. As you'll see, this is pretty straightforward and minimal machining overall, but as these 4 holes let on, it is compatible with Fiend's Havoc guard, so you can go ahead and bolt that on. If you choose not to, the sprocket comes in this tumbled aluminum, which I think is actually pretty damn dope. It also comes in red and black and is available in 25 tooth design only. It costs $38.95 on sourcebmx.com, and because I forgot the weight, it is 3.7 ounces, aka 105 grams. Next up, we have the Demolition and Market collab sprocket. This is the second version that they've put together. This one is 6 millimeters thick. It is made of 7075 T6 aluminum, and just like the Fiend sprocket, it's pretty straightforward. You can choose Demolition side, you can choose Market side, and it has 4 bolts, which they say are compatible with most nylon guards. So I don't know if that's necessarily a Demolition guard, or let's just do a little experiment. They match up. So you can run a Fiend Havoc guard on a Market Demolition sprocket. You can make that decision. I don't know if that is intentional or if I am putting somebody on blast, but that's not necessarily my problem. You can go ahead and pick up this Demolition sprocket for $40.99. It is available in black and black only, 25 and 28 tooth versions. This 25 tooth version weighs 4.0 ounces, aka 112 grams. Here we have United's MDL-CLS sprocket, and I'm going to have to read directly from United on this one. The MDL-CLS is where the trails meet the street, a sprocket that has the option to add a guard without taking anything away from the original design. A trails-inspired sprocket that gets a beefing up when you bolt on the cleverly engineered guard. It is made from CNC'd 6061 T6 alloy. The MDL-CLS sprocket will take everything in its stride. So there it is verbatim. Obviously, going back to the Fiend one, pretty straightforward design, but this one really does look like a normal sprocket, and you wouldn't even glance a couple of times at it and think that you could add a guard to it. The MDL CLS is available for $39.99. Comes in black and polished, and it does have a bit of a variety of sizes. I assume because it's marketed towards trail dudes, it is in this 25 tooth, a 28 tooth, a 30 tooth, and a 33 tooth. This one itself, aka the 25 tooth, weighs in at 2.6 ounces, aka 74 grams. Last sprocket. This is the Colt NWO sprocket. It is machined from 7075 T6 aluminum, and that is pretty much about it. Pretty straightforward overall, to the point that there's actually not even a Colt logo on this, which I found pretty surprising. Cool overall, dialed machining in there, definitely in the ridges. You can really see what they were going for. But yeah, jumping straight into the price, it is $39.99. Comes in black and black and black, and is available in 25, 28, and 30 tooth versions. And this one, the 25 tooth, weighs in at 2.7 ounces, aka 76 grams. So that is all I have. Hopefully you learned something about sprockets, at least a little bit more than just the specs and all these. Always thank you to Source BMX for sending out all these sprockets and making these videos possible. If you need any parts, head to sourcebmx.com. They have those 2 giant warehouses on different sides of the earth that are filled with BMX products, and a staff of people ready to ship them out to you. So thank you again to Source. Follow them on Instagram at Source BMX. Might as well follow at BMX, which is us, if you're not already. And if you noticed my shirt, we should have those in a shop soon. They will be in a link in the description if they exist. If not, we'll have to wait a little bit longer. Thank you again for watching. Feel free to leave any comments with critiques or requests. I'm open to it all. Cheers.